if you're going to do it, the audit should be worth it. The problem is, audits are hard. Yet we've issued over 20,000 reports to 2,000 clients worldwide.
And she said, well, because I've been working on this for the last 6 months, he knows that this is the week that the auditor's here. And when I get home, he's gonna ask me, Mom, did you pass?
Mom, did you do a great job?
And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Cybersecurity and compliance will no longer be a mystery.
Hi everyone, welcome into our cybersecurity mission. My name is Allie Krings, I'm your host. Today we're sitting down with Joseph Kirkpatrick, the founder of Kirkpatrick Price. Joseph, how are you today?
I'm doing great today, feeling good.
You know, I'm excited to sit down and really walk us through the process of auditing, but most importantly, why we need such quality audits.
I think there's a huge need for quality audits because the audit is really where you find out if you are meeting the standards, if you are doing what you think that you're doing. And in a world with so many attacks and so many breaches that are happening, those things are getting more frequent, not less frequent. And so part of our fight against those things is to have quality audits.
You know, a lot of the times then that means the audit might not necessarily be super linear. It might not just be this easy run-of-the-mill audit. Why is that maybe sometimes even a good thing?
Well, we talk about checklist audits, and I think most people, if they're honest, you know, they say, yeah, checklist audit is bad. Because if we're trying to just run through a static list of things, that's really not a quality audit. And people recognize that, and so embracing that and saying, yeah, I want a quality audit, which actually is going to be maybe a little bit more stressful. You know, people compare an audit to going to the dentist or sometimes worse things than that. And so, you know, it is something that's difficult. And so we don't want it to be run-of-the-mill and routine. We want it to actually be very thorough.
So you don't like going to the dentist?
You know, I enjoy the dentist. I go to one of those dentists that has the flat screen TV.
Oh, that's
and
really
my
nice.
dentist actually has warm chocolate chip cookies.
Before or after? Oh, that's a huge win.
So that's so they've made, you know, I think this is an interesting thing. They've made dentistry, you know, not what the stereotype is, and so that's what a lot of businesses try to do. And I think it is the key to successful marketing. You know, you identify what the stereotype is, and for auditors, it's this is boring. This is going to be worthless. We're just going to go through a bunch of meaningless tasks. And so we've tried to actually make it something where it is educational. That's part of our values in doing an audit. And so for the dentists, you know, who have this reputation for just, you know, being an unpleasant experience, my dentist has said, I'm going to give you cookies at the end, you know, to try to break that stereotype.
Win.
There's a plumber out there who has an ad campaign that says, we show up on time smelling good. And those are like the two stereotypes about plumbers. They're always late and they always are gross. And so they're breaking that stereotype. So for auditors, we're trying to break the stereotype and say, you're actually going to get something beneficial out of going through the audit, and you're not going to get to the end and go, man, I'm glad that was over.
Right. So I think a lot of that just does come down to that quality testing. So walk us through, what exactly is quality testing?
I think quality testing first starts with aligning the auditor with the environment that is being tested. You know, if you are not finding an auditor who is equipped to test your environment, you're making the wrong choice. You know, if you, I used to have a mechanic who only worked on Mazdas. Okay. And so he didn't work on Toyotas and Hondas and Chevys and Fords. You know, he just did Mazdas. And that was his background, that's what he was trained in, and so that's how he advertised. I work on Mazdas. And so the same thing is true if I've got an auditor who is proficient with AWS, but you're not in AWS, that's probably not the auditor for you. So I think quality starts with having an auditor who's aligned with what is being tested. And then after that, you know, having a quality audit plan. What are the things that are going to be looked at and why? Having a plan going into it rather than having an auditor who's just wandering through some random, you know, selection of things. And unfortunately, a lot of auditors do that.
What would even be an example of a quality finding?
Well, I can think of a few examples here. One would be we had an auditor one time who found that vulnerabilities existed in the containers that they had deployed via Kubernetes, and other auditors look at that type of situation, and the client says, "Oh, we use a standard image to roll out all of our images, and so." Because we use this standard image, we have no vulnerabilities in our environment. And a lot of auditors who are low quality will say, check, thank you. They will report on that in the audit report. The company uses a standard image. Well, our auditor went a step beyond that and said, okay, that's the supposition that you're using a standard image, and so you're always using the latest one. But he actually discovered that in the routine changes that they were doing, their engineering team was actually deploying a different version of the image in order to fix the thing that they were fixing, which actually circumvented the fact that they were calling the latest image. And so if he hadn't checked that, which was actually a somewhat difficult thing to check, it took time for him to do that, but if he hadn't checked that, we would have missed the fact that they had hundreds of vulnerabilities that were in this environment that I think other auditors would have just accepted what the engineer said and moved on.
And that's really one of the biggest differences with Kirkpatrick Price is I think there is an easy way and a hard way, and sometimes the hard way is the right way.
Yes, we emphasize that at Kirkpatrick Price. So like understanding the culture, not only of the auditor's company, but also of your company as well. What is your culture around these things? Like, do you want to just move through routine things and do a checklist and be done? A lot of people ask for that, and we don't do business with people who are wanting that type of audit. Or is the culture, we actually do want to push ourselves and we do want to find things, because we are pushing our people to learn about new emerging technologies. We're asking our people to learn about what it means to do quality testing like that. And I remember the first time I got introduced to Kubernetes, in an environment like that, I was like, oh man, I've got to learn this. This is something that I've got to bone up on. And relying on our team, people who are trained in that, in order to pull them in and learn from them, like learning and education is being done so that we push ourselves, and we definitely have to be aligned as an auditor and the company being audited to make sure that's what we both want out of this.
So that's actually a really critical component of that. The clients that you might work with, they need to have the right kind of mindset and the right attitude to be able to team up to have that kind of success and therefore a quality audit.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with one of our clients, and it was a CIO of one of our great clients, and he said, your auditor's great. I've never worked with someone so professional and so skilled. And I said, yes, Scott is one of our best auditors. I've never gotten a complaint on him. And this guy, he has this incredulous look, and he's just like, you mean you've gotten complaints on your auditors? And I thought he was joking, because that's actually a very common thing. People will say your auditor is being too hard on me, or your auditor is asking for ridiculous things, or your auditor is going too far, your auditor is going out of scope. That's actually very common. And I said, oh, we get complaints all the time. And he said, what kind of complaints do you get? And I shared some of those things. And he said, but the reason you go through the audit is to actually do that and find those things. And I said, yeah, you're telling me. And he was just like, people are actually upset about having an auditor who's like that. And I still thought he was being a little, he was being silly with me, but I realized finally that he was being totally serious. And, and I said, what is it about your attitude, that makes you think that's ridiculous? And he goes, if I'm gonna go through an audit, I want to be pushed. I want to grow. I want to learn something. And I was really just getting to know that CIO at that point, and I really discovered that he had this attitude of continuous improvement, and he saw the audit as a way to push harder. And so you have to have an attitude for that, and I learned a lot from that. That reminded me about why we go through our audits, and that reminded me why we need to have a strong QA program and all those kinds of things, because I'm like, yeah, that is what we want, and you have to embrace that.
So with that being said, I think it comes down to not just doing a quality audit, but having quality auditors.
Yeah.
How do you even find the right kind of people to fit in on your team?
It's hard to find people. You hear constantly, mostly on LinkedIn, which is a recruiting and like job networking site, and you see articles all the time where they're saying there are not enough people to address the cybersecurity challenges that we have.
Wow.
And so we need to be training the next generation. There aren't enough qualified resources. And so we look for people who have sat in the seat of our client. Like, we don't want to hire someone who has a computer information systems degree and put them through a 2-week training and put them out there. That's just not Kirkpatrick Price. So we look for people who have been directors of IT, directors of engineering, CIOs, CISOs, compliance officers. We want people who've been there and actually operated the technologies that we are auditing. I also look for people who are learners. Sometimes you'll find somebody who has been in a role that doesn't seem like it correlates, but they've got all these certifications, or they've done all this learning that they're kind of touting. I've done this class and that. And if you talk to them and they say, yeah, I'm learning because I want to get into this, I want to grow, that tells you you've got somebody who is going to approach an audit in the right way, because they are constantly seeking information on what it is they're doing.
So many businesses will kind of give themselves like a mission or a tagline, like you might think of Walmart with their amazing prices, right? Or TurboTax. They really focus on the speed of which you're going to complete your mission, right? Here at Kirkpatrick Price, you've kind of made it your tagline to bring out the best in terms of quality. How did you choose that versus, doing things the quickest or whatever else it could be?
So this is one of my favorite stories of all time. It was just my own personal, moment where I learned that I wanted to be a quality auditor. And our purpose statement is "We make sure," and so that really calls to the fact that we do want to approach things in a quality way. We have an auditor now who tells me that whenever the client starts pushing back on, like, why are you asking for this? And nobody has ever asked me for this before. She takes her plaque that says Kirkpatrick Price, we make sure, and she shows it because we make sure. And that usually helps people to understand why we're asking for what we're asking for. But in the very early days of Kirkpatrick Price, you're concerned about getting your company started, and you're concerned about, getting new clients on. That's like the main priority, when you're just starting out as a business. And so I was just moving and shaking, I was just moving around very quickly and trying to take on as many clients as we possibly could. And I was actually in your neck of the woods. I was in Minneapolis, and I was testing a new client. And from the word go, when I got into their office, I started talking about how I wanted to make an early flight to get back home. And so I was really kind of sending the message that, hey, I want to cut this short. And frankly, I was moving through. I was just like, show me your antivirus, show me a patch, show me your firewall. I mean, I really was just going through the motions because I was trying to get out of there. And on the last day, I had finished, and I was leaving that night, so I was getting to go home a night early, which was my objective. I was like, that was what I wanted out of this.
I mean, everybody wants to leave the office at Friday at 3, right?
Yes. And so I was leaving early, and so I'm packing up, and this lady who was the director of operations for this small company, in Minneapolis, she goes, so did we pass the audit? And I was like, well, it's not a pass-fail. It's an opinion that we issue of whether or not, you reasonably are doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. But yes, you did a great job, and, that's what the report is going to say, And I'm just hardly paying attention. I'm still packing up. And she goes, well, that's great, because when I get home, my 9-year-old son is going to ask me if we passed the audit or not. And I just kind of stopped,
Aw.
you know, for what I was doing, and I was like, why is your 9-year-old son going to ask about the
Yeah.
audit? And she said, well, because I've been working on this for the last 6 months, and I've been working late hours and on the weekend, and he knows that I've been really stressed about this project. And, you know, I've been writing all the policies and procedures, and I've been working on all the configurations and everything. And so he knows that this is the week that the auditor is here.
Aw.
And when I get home, he's going to ask me, Mom, did you pass?
Mom, did you do a great job?
And it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
I was just like, this lady has worked on this for 6 months to the point that they're talking about it at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And her
How many 9-year-olds know
yeah,
what an
exactly.
auditor
And
is or
her
does?
son, who his hero is probably his mom.
Totally.
You know, and he loves his mom, and he wants to see his mom be successful, and he wants to see his mom succeed. And if she comes home and goes, well, I just wasted my time in those last 6 months. This guy didn't even ask me hardly anything, you know?
Yeah.
Then what have I just done? I have just contributed to this company that worked so hard to get ready for the audit to actually not try so hard next time
Yep.
and not care so much next time. And so
Yeah.
I'm actually weakening our cybersecurity, you know, practices. And so that little boy and his mother like convinced me that day. I went back. I think we had 3 auditors at the time. When I went back and I said, hey, everybody, if we're going to do an audit, we're going to do an audit.
Yeah.
And we're going to do quality audits. I'm not going to do this,
Cool.
go through the motion stuff. And as a testament to our team, you know, and the type of people that we've always hired here, everybody was on board. You know,
Cool.
everybody was like, yeah, we want to do this right, and we want to do this well. And so from that day forward, we became what I believe we're known in the industry as, which is a quality audit firm.
So, you know, I just need the full circle moment for, you know, the mom, the little boy here. Are they on payroll? Did she pass with flying colors?
Man.
Well, you know, is he the next hire?
So he must be like 28 by now.
Oh, I hope he's doing well.
Yeah, so I've lost track, but maybe he's an auditor today. I don't know, but no, I don't know what's going on. But you know, looking back, one of the things that I do try to teach to our auditors is, you know, you have to think about what's going on with the customer, because we come in and we're like, okay, we're working on this audit, and
Right.
so it's all
Right.
ones and zeros, and it's all, you know, testing results and all this kind of stuff. But like that company, you know, once they got their first audit,
Yeah.
like it meant a new contract for them, and it meant hiring more people.
Yeah.
It meant keeping the jobs of the people that they had.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you understand that this person that you're auditing, they're stressed already
Yep.
about the audit, but they're also stressed about maybe their job, or they're stressed about the success or failure of their organization. There's usually something behind, you know,
Yep.
why they do the audit. And so we try to keep that in mind, because that kind of motivates you to
Right.
do a quality job too.
Yeah.
Because you know, you're doing something that they're going to leverage to actually grow their business.
Right. Well, I think on your end, you can ensure that you're doing a quality audit, but on the back end, how can a client be sure that they're actually receiving a quality audit?
I think a lot of people know, you know, if they actually read their report, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, that's step one.
Okay.
You need to read your report. And I think a lot of people know, you know.
Yeah.
I fired an auditor one time because he had copied, you know, information from another environment, and the company called. This is how I knew, and this is why I fired the auditor. You know, they called and they said, hey, this says that we use Trend Micro, but we don't use that. You know, and so I did some investigation and figured out that he had you know, used information from, and you know, that's an ethical
Yeah.
failure.
Yep.
You know, we won't tolerate that, and the industry should not tolerate that. And so read your report, because you need to see if, you know, the testing that was done is appropriate. And as
Right.
a company, you know, you can tell the difference between someone who really checked and someone who didn't. So that's step one. You know, step two is you know, if you have qualified people internally, you know, that is their job to oversee, you know, the auditor and make sure that the right thing is happening. You know, I've been involved in a lot of audits where it seemed like the job of the person running the audit from the client was to minimize and reduce the amount of testing, but actually you should empower your people to promote, hey,
Right.
we're not done with this topic, are you? You haven't even looked at this, this, and this yet. You know, and so like leveraging people who do have the skills and talent to do that. If you don't have that in your organization, then seeking the advice of someone else to like look at this and go, hey, is this a quality audit that we're getting? How would you test, you know, these cloud settings or whatever? So I think just seeking, you know, advice and reviewing the results that you get will go a long way to catching a lot of the low-hanging fruit.
You know, I really appreciate that you're challenging the client to do that for themselves, because I know here at Kirkpatrick Price, that's something that you have challenged within your own organization, right? You don't just have auditors across the board, you have professional writers, you have different people who specialize in different areas. And so I think it is really important that while you're doing quality work, that it's also being checked by people who are speaking that same language and understanding as well. You know, I do want to invite you guys at this time, if you have any questions for Joseph in the future or during this podcast, you're thinking, I really wish he touched on X, Y, or Z, please go to kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast. You can check the show notes down below as well to submit some of those ideas or questions that you do have. Joseph, do you have anything else that you want to add on?
You know, I just want to encourage everyone out there to join us on our cybersecurity mission, because it is about elevating the standards for cybersecurity and compliance, and that is about seeking quality. You know, we are in an age where we have so much technology at our disposal to make things better, and sometimes we use that technology to make things quicker or easier, which is definitely a motivating factor. But we actually can do more frequent checking now. We can do continuous evaluation of our controls with the technology that we have. It's not cost prohibitive the way it used to be. And so I just want to encourage everyone to embrace that and grow in that area. You know, don't move away from quality checks and quality testing for the sake of automation or just getting, you know, a meaningless piece of paper in your hands. Let's actually try to elevate the standards that we require of ourselves.
Awesome. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening. Again, I'd love for you to go to kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast. Check the show notes down below for all of the episode resources. My name's Allie Krings, and we'll see you guys again soon here on our cybersecurity mission.
When you work with a Kirkpatrick Price cybersecurity auditor, you work with someone who's been in your shoes. Let's see what the next expert is ready to share to support you in your cybersecurity mission.
Hi, my name is Jeff Bocelli, and I'm a lead practitioner at Kirkpatrick Price. I originally got into information security and the various frameworks when an organization I worked at before couldn't agree internally on what our information security policies should be. We researched a variety of frameworks, and looking at these frameworks allowed us to understand what industry experts already agreed on. I like to recommend the PCI DSS as a great starting point for any organization. While the framework is written about cardholder data and security, it can really be adapted to any type of information and sensitive data. You can find the PCI DSS on the Council's website, and you can find a variety of videos about the requirements on the Kirkpatrick Price YouTube page.
Are you ready to join a community of 10,000 people who are working together to elevate the standards for cybersecurity and compliance? It's free to sign up at kirkpatrickprice.com/podcast or check the show notes and achieve greater levels of assurance today. Thanks for joining us on our cybersecurity mission.